I'm Maryam Shaheen, a filmmaker, and I've been working in and around Gaza for 30 years. As I watch the 2023 devastation of this part of Palestine by the Israeli army, I look back at the Gaza that I knew. From the optimism of 2005 when the Israelis withdrew to the destruction of the wars that followed, these are echoes of a lost Gaza. Much of the population of Gaza are Palestinian refugees from the 1948 Nakba, or catastrophe, caused by the war that saw the establishment of the State of Israel. In 1967, Gaza was occupied by the Israelis. They eventually withdrew 38 years later in 2005, and I moved to Gaza, where I found a mood of optimism. I heard the people talk of Gaza becoming a Singapore of the Mediterranean, a small place with big potential. In the summer of 2005, I filmed these high school students about to graduate. They were elite by Gaza standards, studying at the American International School, and all were full of optimism. Hala Abdul Wahab was the class president.
Not only are we graduates, we are delegates of a better future, diplomats of AISG, Palestine, and humanity. Thank you.
Back then, hope was everywhere. With the Israelis leaving, Gazans were talking about rebuilding this once vibrant coastal city. These were the young people, the next generation, who would help achieve that bright future. But everything turned out differently. Israel's onslaught on Gaza began at the end of 2008 and continued into 2009. I wondered what had become of those happy young people I'd met. I discovered one of the graduates was still in Gaza, but I was unable to contact her. But I did manage to speak to one of her classmates, who had since left Gaza and was studying at the American University of Cairo.
Hello, Yasmin. It's Maryam. I'm calling from Ramallah.
I saw that two F-16 bombs destroyed the school, rubble and ashes, and that there is nothing left, and that they killed the guard who has been the guard for the last 8 years. And I saw that there is nothing left in the school, and that the future of the students in the school is like buried under the rubble now.
Back in 2005, I met Jawdat al-Khudari, an antiquities collector. We sat in his remarkable garden surrounded by fruit trees and honeybees, cacti, and singing birds. Jawdat had collected fantastic antiquities from Gaza's storied past.
This is the original Gaza. If you want to see and imagine how Gaza looks in modern years, in the past, you can see Gaza here. That's it, as simple as that.
Jawdat showed me the many artifacts he had collected dating back to the Philistine era. He had turned his spacious home into a makeshift museum.
2,500 years BC. This is the oldest piece which I have.
Jawdat owned a construction company, but his true passion was collecting things from Gaza's rich past. In the Arab world, Gaza is known as the city of Hashem, a reference to the Prophet Muhammad's grandfather, a merchant who is believed to have died here. Down through the centuries, the grave of Hashem and the mosque which houses it became an object of pilgrimage for Muslims from all over the world.
Gaza, in general, either in heritage, in economy, in business, in politics, just need a hope for better future. Give the people here a hope for the future.
In 2008, Jawdat al-Khudari donated many of his antiquities to the Gaza Museum, which he helped finance. But then the war came, and I wondered if the museum, together with Gaza's other cultural sites, had been damaged. Jawdat was visiting his daughters in Cairo when Israel launched its war on Gaza at the end of 2008. A few weeks later, I managed to track him down in Ramallah, where he was waiting to get back home to be with his wife and 3 boys.
ممكن نحكي تقريبا فيش حد. ويمكن هذه لأول مرة بالتاريخ حرب بهالشراسة هذا والدمر هذه، والسكان المدنيين ما عندهم فرصة إنهم حتى يغادروا مكان الحرب.
Back in 2005, I also met with Sami Abdul Shafi, a business management consultant who had spent half his life in San Francisco before returning to his native Palestine just before Israel's withdrawal. He wanted to take part in building a new Gaza.
Just imagine for a minute, what would Gaza be like if in fact there is freedom of movement at crossing points? If in fact we could have a small port that could could import and export goods, you will immediately see an increase in the chances of development. You will see an almost immediate increase in innovation.
Shortly after the Israeli withdrawal, I joined Sami and his wife Najla for an evening at a local restaurant. The Israelis had left, but they still made their presence felt. We sat down for dinner, and an Israeli helicopter gunship hovered overhead.
Mariam, instead of stargazing, we're Apache gazing.
Even then, in 2005, I had noticed Sami's hopes begin to evaporate. In 2009, Sami was still in Gaza. He no longer spoke of Gaza as a business opportunity. Then, it was a matter of simple survival.
The situation in the Gaza Strip has been very difficult since the beginning of the war. So many people were forced to leave their homes several times. I personally know several families who have moved 3 to 4 times to seek safety, and yet they were unable to find any safe place in the Gaza Strip.
But Sami remained defiant.
It is no less of a very clear statement that the anti-peace camp in Israel wants to destroy the civilian population of the Gaza Strip and to destroy its potential to go forward and to join the competitive and peace-loving nations around the world. But they will fail because the spirit of the Gaza Strip will never die, even after such huge devastation.
This is Shati refugee camp. Situated on the coast, it was established in 1948 as a makeshift home for the Palestinian refugees who fled to Gaza from surrounding villages and towns, occupied by the Israelis, who then incorporated the areas into their state. More than 75 years on, generations of Palestinian refugees have lived here, waiting to return to their homes. Back in 2005, I met a group of girls in the camp who were hoping to transcend their ghetto life and achieve something against the odds. They were the one and only Palestinian girls rowing team. 16-year-old Fatima Nasser was the team's lead rower.
كانت رغبتي إني أشارك في المسابقات هذه وإن أنا يعني أرفع رأس فلسطين وإن أنا بشارك يعني إنه في بنت بتشارك لسه في مسابقات تانية وأصلاً أنا بحب يعني المسابقات.
Fatima and her team had trained for years on these machines. Back then, they were waiting for the delivery of rowing boats to Gaza, but the boats never came. They were seized by the Israelis for so-called security reasons.
أملي إنه يوصل هذا المشروع لكل العالم وإن إحنا نعمل مسابقات مع كل الدول التانيين ونتشارك وإن إحنا يعني نفرج للعالم إنه فلسطين بتقدر تنجز حاجات كبيرة.
The girls had expected things would change after the Israeli withdrawal, but like for other Palestinians, such hopes were all in the past. More than 3 years later, I tried to contact Fatima. I wanted to know how she had coped with the war. I was concerned since I knew Fatima's home was close to the home of one of Hamas's leaders and a likely target for the Israeli army.
أول ما بدأ اليهود الهجوم على غزة كنا إحنا في المدارس وفجأة ما سمعنا إلا صوت صواريخ بتنزل كانت ورا مدرستنا كان في المشتل أو يعني قريب منا. طب إحنا اللي زينا مش عارفين إيش نسوي سيبنا المدرسة وروحنا على الدار يعني بأي لحظة كان الخطر ممكن يصيبنا يعني الولاد كانوا مروحين من المدرسة والصواريخ بتنزل فلقيت أخواتي بطلنا نعرف ننام في الليل الزنانة 24 ساعة شغالة والصواريخ من كل جهة بتشتغل ومستقبلنا إحنا كله ضاع أصلا أنا خايفة بين دقيقة ودقيقة إنه الصاروخ ينزل علينا طب إحنا اللي زينا يعني بيتنا اسبست واخواتي هدول كنا 6 نفار يعني احنا خايفين باي دقيقه ينزل صاروخ يقتلنا كنا طب احنا بدنا نعيش انا لسه ما عشتش كثير واخواتي لسه ما عاشوا احنا بدنا نعيش زي الشعوب الثانيه.
Despite Israel's withdrawal, Palestinians in Gaza still felt surrounded and occupied. In 2007, I wanted to gauge the brain drain as the middle class sought to leave. I met Ibrahim Al-Af, a mental health worker. Back then, only 40% of Gazans still had jobs, and Ibrahim was one of them. He actually had 3 jobs just to keep him and his family afloat. He was also one of the many well-educated Gazans who had applied to emigrate.
The situation in Gaza has really deteriorated over the past few years, ever since the start of the Intifada. Until the coming of Hamas, things were not really bad. But with the coming of Hamas and even the stop and the blockade enforced by the United States and Europe, and the drop down in the rate of the dollar, this caused the economy to really go into a state of almost chaos. The level of poverty and hardship has increased a lot.
In 2007, Ibrahim and his wife Sohad were expecting twins. The couple already had 4-year-old triplets, Muhammad, Aboud, and Lulu. Ibrahim and Sohad began thinking of emigrating when the situation in Gaza took a turn for the worse, following the outbreak of fighting between Fatah and Hamas in the previous year.
The economic situation is not the real cause for me to leave. It's the security and the welfare of my children. This is what really makes me really thinking of leaving. The last factional skirmishes, they were really disastrous. And the street downstairs was a battlefield almost, with mines, masked people, and so on. So I'm using techniques, mental health techniques, to try to counter the effect of the continuous cycle of violence that we are living in. But it's not good enough. My little girl is drawing people, masked people with guns. She's afraid of being shot at. I'm trying to immigrate for the past almost year and a half.
What are the places you have in mind? Where would you go to?
Anywhere except for Baghdad, Somalia, and Afghanistan. Any other place would be good enough. There are no embassies here in Gaza. We are cut off the world, as they say.
Ibrahim was alienated from the rest of the world. Being a Palestinian refugee, he was officially stateless and had no passport.
It's not the issue of leaving. I don't have any traveling documents to leave with. This is not the problem that I suffer alone from. Almost 100,000 people living in Gaza are having the same problem.
Ibrahim refused to give up his goal to get out of Gaza.
I'm applying for immigration in several places where we have, like Canada, Australia, and so on.
Unlike Ibrahim, his wife Suhad and all their children have valid passports. A pivotal moment for Suhad came when 3 children were killed in 2006.
أنا كنت بشتغل في الأنروا وطلعنا الساعة تقريباً 8:30 وديت أولادي الروضة وفتحت الأخبار قالوا انقتلوا 3 أطفال. أنا بدون تفكير على طول قمت من مكتبي وقدمت استقالتي ومشيت. بس أنا لا كنت مفكرة بس في حاجة واحدة إني أولادي لازم يقعدوا في البيت مش لازم يروحوا الروضة لأنه الأطفال ال3 ماتوا في هم رايحين المدرسة. فأنا شو بيأمل لي إنه فتح أو حماس ما ياخدوا طار من بعض ومشاكل بيناتهم.
With such fears constantly on her mind, Suhad decided it was better to leave Gaza. 2 years after meeting Ibrahim and his family, I managed to track them down to find out how they had coped under Israel's bombardment of Gaza. But they were still all stuck there.
We have been forced to leave our home. We live in an area which is close by to many governmental buildings and military sites. It was really unsafe. The room that you're seeing us here, this is a living room in the day and a sleeping room in the night. This house holds almost 4 families. We sleep together just for the company and to feel safe, safer in the crowds, as they say. Leaving there, it was very fast. We did not take our belongings. We have basically 2 sets of change for each one of us. So whenever one gets dirty, it has to be washed. Not to mention, of course, the problem of the electricity and water. We were cut off water and electricity for almost 1 week. We really thought it was really a disaster not having water and electricity in a house with children.
Some Gazans were luckier than Ibrahim and his family. Back in 2005, I had met up with Basil Nasser, who had spent over $100,000 setting up his restaurant business. Back then, many Palestinians had invested in the local economy, confident that with Israelis gone, Gaza would prosper. But in the following years, dining out became an increasingly difficult and perilous thing to do. When I met up with Basil again in 2007, his restaurant was barely operational, and he wanted to leave Gaza. He and his family had applied for and obtained immigration papers for Canada. I met up with Basil just before he left.
Most of them leave Gaza because of the economic situation and because getting some job, because over the past few years, due to the security situation, most of the businesses have closed down and we have no foreign investors coming to inject money in Gaza. So there are no more jobs to be created here. But for me, I am having a very good job at a United Nations agency, and I'm leaving for a different reason. Mainly the future of my kids and the security after this process of polarization between Fatah and Hamas and the clashes that took place on the ground, deadly clashes. I was in one of these clashes at home, imprisoned like for a week. We couldn't leave.
By the summer of 2007, the inter-Palestinian fighting in Gaza had ended with a decisive Hamas victory. Israel's siege of Gaza became tighter, and Basil and his family became more eager to leave. They searched for information about their new home in Canada on the internet. An incident at their children's school terrified Basil and his wife.
So there was an incident in the school of my kids where it was bombed and burned, and so next time these people could, shoot at the bus.
Although deeply attached to Gaza, he felt he had no choice but to leave.
Every day, we are convinced that it was a wise decision.
So it's the educated class that is leaving.
These are the educated class, and they are highly paid, and they are having some good jobs. But still, security is one of the most important basic needs for any one of us.
Basil and his wife Ibtisam asked their 5 children to vote on whether they wanted to stay in Gaza or emigrate to Canada. Mahmoud, 16, was the most eloquent of his siblings.
I vote to leave.
Why?
Because Canada is a better place than Gaza, and I intend to be a soccer player. That's my dream. In Canada, there's more opportunities for people to have their dream come true.
Ibtisam could no longer hide her worries about moving her family to a foreign country.
من شوي صعب بس بتأمل يعني نتجاوز هاي المحنة كمان يعني إشي مش سهل إنك تفكر إنك تطلع من بلدك لبلد تانية إلا إشي يعني غصب عنا.
Basil Nasser and his family left Gaza in the summer of 2008, just 6 months before Israel launched its war. Some of the people in this old film, like Sami, the entrepreneur, and Jasmine, the student, now live abroad. Others I can no longer contact. But I did manage to speak to Jawdat al-Khudari, the antiquities collector, who's still there.
جودات، أولاً كيف حالك؟ كيف العيلة؟ يعني كلهم بخير؟
الحمد لله كلهم بخير، الحمد لله. الحمد لله.
وأنت وين الآن؟
أنا بغزة.
الله يحماك، الله يحماك يا جودات.
يا رب يا رب.
شو صار بالبيت وبالمتحف؟
نعم؟
شو صار بالبيت وبالمتحف؟
ما إلا أنا عيت. بدأت العملية يوم 7 أكتوبر. تمام؟
تمام.
والأمور كانت صعبة كثير. تمام؟ بدنا 4 أيام بالبيت. تمام؟
تمام.
مع كثر القصف والدمار والخراب طلعنا من البيت. طلعت 4 أيام. تمام. وما دخلناهوش من هذه الفترة، هو والمتحف. وبنسمع انه صار يعني في دمار جزئي، بس ايش حجم الدمار اللي صار؟ كيف شكله؟ كيف هو؟ مش عارف، لانه ما حدا عنده قدرة يوصل للمكان هذا، المكانين.
مفهوم مفهوم. الأولاد بخير؟
الحمد لله كله بخير، الحمد لله.
اوكي، الحمد لله. الله يوفقك، الله يوفقك، والله يحميكم كلكم.
يا رب
يا رب، امين.
يلا.
شكرا. دير بالك على حالك جودة، دير بالك على حالك، ما تخاطر بحياتك. شكرا شكرا عزيز. باي باي. باي باي، الى اللقاء.
Jawdat's determination to stay reflects the resilience I found in so many Palestinians in Gaza, despite the devastation and the danger they face today. Looking back at the Gaza I knew, which is now being destroyed, I can only hope that this resilience prevails for this very special and important place in Palestine.